High Sentinel Lyra stood at the observation deck of the crystal spire, her translucent form catching the light of Caloria's setting sun. The familiar purple-tinged atmosphere that had protected their world for millennia was growing thinner by the day. The latest readings from their atmospheric monitoring stations confirmed her worst fears. Their protective shield against the harsh radiation of space was failing faster than predicted. The Calorians had achieved remarkable heights in their 50,000 years of civilization. Their cities were marvels of crystalline architecture that channeled and stored solar energy. Their society had eliminated conflict, poverty, and inequality centuries ago. They had even mastered limited space travel within their own system. But none of their achievements could solve the crisis they now faced. Lyra's crystalline form dimmed slightly as she received the latest atmospheric decay projections through her neural interface. 6 months. That's all the time they had left before the atmosphere would become too thin to protect them from deadly radiation. The entire Calorian species, all 12 million of them, faced extinction. She made her way to the Grand Council chamber, where the other 11 High Sentinels awaited. Their forms sparkled with anxiety, an emotional response that manifested as rapid shifts in their crystalline structures' light patterns. The chamber itself, usually alive with the soft chiming sounds of Calorian communication, was eerily quiet. "The projections are confirmed," Lyra announced, her voice creating gentle harmonic resonances in the crystal walls. "We must evacuate our entire population within 6 months, or we face extinction." High Sentinel Zar, the eldest among them, stepped forward. His ancient form had grown nearly transparent with age. "We have sent requests for aid to every advanced civilization we know of. The Arcturus Confederation has the technology and resources to evacuate our entire population within weeks." "And their response?" asked Lyra, though she already suspected the answer. "They claim such an operation would be economically unfeasible. They suggest we focus on preserving our cultural artifacts instead." Zar's form flickered with barely contained anger. The Proxima Alliance cited their policy of non-intervention. The Centaurian Empire demanded technology exchanges we cannot possibly provide. One by one, the other Sentinels reported similar responses from various spacefaring civilizations. Some hadn't even bothered to reply. The Calorians' peaceful nature and focus on cultural and artistic achievements had left them with little to bargain with in a galaxy that valued military might and technological superiority. "There is one option remaining," said High Sentinel Mira, the youngest of the council. Her form pulsed with determination. "We broadcast our plea across all frequencies to all worlds capable of receiving it, not just the advanced civilizations, but the emerging ones as well. The developing worlds." Zar's tone carried both skepticism and concern. "Most haven't even achieved faster than light travel. What could they possibly do to help?" "Perhaps nothing," Mira admitted. "But they might view our situation differently than the established powers. They haven't yet learned to ignore calls for help in favor of political convenience." The council debated through the night. Some argued it was beneath their dignity to beg for help from primitive species. Others feared drawing the attention of potentially hostile developing civilizations. But as their atmosphere continued to thin above them, desperation won out. They crafted their message carefully, encoding it in simple mathematical patterns that any species advanced enough to detect interstellar transmissions could decode. They included basic information about their world, their people, and the crisis they faced. The message was simple: "We are the Calorians. Our world is dying. We seek mercy. We seek help. We offer friendship and gratitude in return." The message was broadcast in all directions, traveling at the speed of light across the vast expanses of space. Most civilizations that received it dismissed it immediately. Some never detected it at all. Others archived it as an interesting cultural artifact before returning to their own concerns. But on a small blue planet, in an unremarkable solar system, at a modest radio telescope facility in the mountains of Chill, A young researcher named Dr. Elena Santos was about to make a discovery that would change the course of two civilizations forever. She had no way of knowing that humanity's response to this single transmission would reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it truly meant to be an advanced civilization. Dr. Elena Santos stared at her monitor in the quiet hours before dawn, her coffee long since gone cold. The signal pattern she detected 3 hours ago continued to repeat with perfect mathematical precision. Her hands trembled slightly as she ran the analysis for the 12th time. "This can't be right," she muttered, pushing her unruly curls away from her face. The European Southern Observatory's array had picked up plenty of interesting signals during her 5 years there, but nothing like this. Nothing that screamed artificial intelligence quite so clearly. She reached for her phone, then hesitated. Calling the director at 3 a.m. over what might be nothing would be career suicide. But if she was right, her finger hovered over the call button when her office door burst open. Dr. James Chen, her colleague from the night shift, rushed in with his tablet clutched to his chest. "Elena, are you seeing this?" He thrust the tablet toward her, displaying a nearly identical pattern to the one on her screen. Elena just confirmed it. "It's coming from the direction of the Carina Nebula, and it's definitely not natural." Within hours, the modest Chilean facility became the center of global attention. Teams from NASA, ESA, and other space agencies arrived to verify the signal. The message itself, encoded in simple mathematical principles, proved relatively easy to decrypt. The implications, however, were staggering. "They're asking for help," Elena explained to the packed auditorium 3 days later, her voice steadied despite her exhaustion. "The Kilorians, that's what they call themselves, are facing an environmental catastrophe. They have roughly 6 months before their atmosphere degrades to lethal levels. And they're broadcasting this to everyone," asked NASA's deputy administrator, leaning forward in his seat. "Yes, but that's not the interesting part," Elena continued, bringing up a new slide. "According to their star charts, they've already contacted several more advanced civilizations. All of them refused to help." The room erupted in murmurs. Humanity had long debated whether they were alone in the universe. Now they had confirmation not only of alien life, but of multiple advanced civilizations, and their first interaction with them was learning of their callous indifference to suffering. Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Force stood up, her expression grave. "What are their exact coordinates?" "Approximately 147 light-years from Earth," Elena replied. "But Admiral, our fastest experimental ships can barely reach Alpha Centauri. We don't have the technology to help them." "Yet," Admiral Chen corrected, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Dr. Santos, are you familiar with Project Breakthrough?" Elena shook her head. "It's a prototype drive system we've been developing in partnership with private space firms. Theoretical maximum speed of 0.15 c. We were planning to test it next year, but," the Admiral's eyes swept the room, "I think we just found our test mission." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of global conferences, emergency meetings, and heated debates. The decision to attempt a rescue mission would require unprecedented international cooperation and resources. Critics argued it was too risky, too expensive, and too far beyond Earth's current capabilities. But something about the Kilorians' plea had struck a chord with humanity. Perhaps it was their honesty in admitting their vulnerability. Perhaps it was the thought of an entire civilization facing extinction, while more advanced species simply turned away. Or perhaps it was simply that humans, despite all their divisions and differences, had never learned to ignore a cry for help. 48 nations pooled their resources. Private space companies redirected their entire production capacity. The Project Breakthrough prototype was fast-tracked, with engineers working around the clock to adapt it for larger vessels. In her apartment above Santiago, Elena packed a small bag. The call from Admiral Chen had come an hour ago. They wanted her on the mission. Her expertise in xenolinguistics and her familiarity with the Kilorian signals made her the obvious choice for the communication team. She paused at her window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, a civilization that had mastered art, architecture, and peace was counting its final days, unaware that help was coming from an unexpected source. Their advanced neighbors had deemed them unworthy of salvation, but humanity, young, reckless, determined humanity, had simply asked, "How soon can we get there?" As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Chen. "Turn on the news." The global broadcast showed identical scenes from cities around the world. Crowds had gathered in streets and squares, holding lights up to the sky. The message was clear. Humanity was reaching out to the stars, not with weapons or demands, but with hope and compassion. Humanity's first major interstellar mission would not be for conquest or exploration, but for mercy. And in answering this call, they would prove that true civilization wasn't measured by the age of your technology, but by your willingness to help those in need. Captain Maya Patel stood on the bridge of the ESS Hope, watching Earth shrink behind them. The massive vessel, constructed in record time through a miracle of global cooperation, represented humanity's greatest achievement and their greatest gamble. "Breakthrough drive charging," announced Dr. Sarah Wu from her station. The young physicist had helped design the experimental propulsion system, and now she would help pilot it. "Core temperature nominal. Quantum field stabilizing." Maya touched the worn photograph tucked into her console, her daughter Zara's smiling face. The mission would take 3 months to reach the Calorians at maximum speed. 3 months back. 6 months during which her daughter would grow up without her. But the same drive that would separate her from one child might save millions of children on a distant world. "All ships reporting ready, Captain," Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez said from communications. The Hope led a fleet of 3 vessels, themselves carrying the smaller ships that would be needed for the actual evacuation. The Providence and the Mercy followed in tight formation, each carrying their share of the precious resources and personnel needed for the mission. "Dr. Santos, final check on our message calculations." Elena looked up from her complex array of linguistics and communication equipment. "Translation matrices are ready. We've been broadcasting our response to the Calorians, but at this distance, we won't know if they've received it until we're much closer." Maya took a deep breath. "Very well, Dr. Wu. Engage the breakthrough drive on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark." The stars blurred as space-time twisted around them. The Hope shuddered, then steadied as the drive found its rhythm. They were now traveling faster than any human-made object in history, but it still wouldn't feel fast enough. The first challenge came 3 weeks into their journey. A micrometeor storm appeared with almost no warning, its particles accelerated to lethal velocities by an unknown phenomenon. "Shields at maximum," Maya ordered as the first impacts rattled the ship. "Engineering, status. Shields holding at 82%. Chief Engineer Yuki Tanaka reported, her fingers flying over her controls. "But the impacts are creating quantum fluctuations in the drive field. We need to drop out of FTL or risk a cascade failure." The fleet dropped back to normal space, their momentum carrying them forward as they weathered the storm. It took 3 precious days to repair the damage and recalibrate the drives. The second major crisis struck at the halfway point. The quantum field surrounding the Providence began to destabilize, threatening to tear the ship apart. The crew had to evacuate to the Hope and Mercy, while a skeleton crew of volunteers remained behind to try to save the ship and its vital cargo. Chief Engineer Tanaka led the repair effort herself, working in spacesuits for 18 hours straight as they rebuilt the field generators. Against all odds, they succeeded, but the close call left everyone acutely aware of how experimental their technology truly was. Through it all, Elena continued to broadcast their message of hope to the Calorians, even though they were still too far to receive any response. She worked with the ship's AI to refine their translation algorithms, preparing for the moment of first contact. The crew found ways to cope with the stress and isolation. They held movie nights in the mess hall, sharing films from their various cultures. They celebrated birthdays with synthesized cake and recycled gifts. They shared stories of home and their hopes for the mission. 2 months into their journey, they received their first clear response from the Calorians. Alina burst onto the bridge during the night shift, her eyes wide with excitement. "They got our message," she exclaimed, plugging her tablet into the main display. "Look at this." The screen filled with crystalline patterns that the translation software converted to text. "We receive your transmission with wonder. You travel between stars to aid strangers. Your vessels are untested. We do not understand, but we feel hope for the first time since our crisis began. Please hurry. Our atmosphere thins more quickly than predicted." The message energized the crew, reminding them of why they had undertaken this dangerous journey. But it also added pressure. They were now racing against a faster countdown than initially calculated. Maya ordered the engineers to push the drives harder, accepting the increased risk. The ship's structural integrity groaned under the strain, but they held together, a testament to human engineering and determination. As they entered the final weeks of their journey, the crew began preparations for the actual evacuation. The smaller ships were checked and rechecked. Medical teams reviewed what they knew of Calorian physiology. Security teams practiced first contact protocols. "Captain," Alina called out one morning, her voice tight with emotion. "New message from the Calorians. They're broadcasting it to the entire galaxy." The message was simple but profound. "To all who receive this, the humans come. They cross the vast dark with untested ships, risking their lives for strangers. They ask nothing in return. Remember this day. Remember that when the advanced worlds turned away, a younger race showed us the true meaning of civilization." Maya looked around her bridge at the crew, humans from every corner of Earth, working together to save a species they had never met. They were tired, stressed, and far from home, but their determination had never wavered. Plot final approach course. The Calorian system's purple sun cast an ethereal glow across the Hope's bridge as they entered orbit. Below them, a world of crystalline cities sparkled like diamonds scattered across violet continents. But the beauty couldn't hide the crisis. Even their instruments could detect the dangerously thin atmosphere. Atmospheric degradation at 78%, Dr. Wu reported grimly. Their estimates were correct. "We have less than a month before total failure." Maya stood from her captain's chair. "Alina, establish contact. Let's not keep them waiting." The communication came immediately, as if the Calorians had been watching for them. A holographic figure materialized on the bridge, a being of living crystal, its form shifting with rainbow colors as it moved. The translation software worked flawlessly, converting the musical tones of Calorian speech into words. "I am High Sentinel Lyra," the figure announced. "On behalf of all Caloria, we welcome you. Though welcome seems inadequate for those who have crossed such distances to save us." Maya stepped forward. "Captain Maya Patil of the Earth Ship Hope. We come with ships, supplies, and a plan. But we'll need your help to evacuate your people in time." "You risk much to help strangers," Lyra observed. "The advanced worlds called us primitive when we built art instead of weapons. What do they call you?" "They don't call us anything," Maya replied with a slight smile. "We're too primitive for them to bother with. Now, shall we prove them wrong together?" The next hours were a blur of activity. Alina and her team worked with Calorian linguists to refine their communications. Engineers from both species collaborated to modify the evacuation ships to safely transport crystalline beings. Dr. Wu discovered that Calorian technology, while different from Earth's, complemented their own in unexpected ways. The Calorians' crystalline nature proved both a challenge and a blessing. They required special containment fields to maintain their structure during transport, but they could enter a form of stasis that allowed more efficient storage during the journey. Their ability to share information through light patterns accelerated the evacuation planning. High Sentinel Lyra joined Maya on a shuttle flight to the surface. The Calorian cities were even more breathtaking up close. towers of living crystal that sang in harmonic resonance with their inhabitants. But thin patches in the atmosphere were visible from the ground now, threatening this centuries-old civilization. Your people seem remarkably calm, Maya observed as they watched Calorians calmly entering the evacuation ships, their forms glowing with soft light. We've had time to accept our fate, Lyra replied. When the advanced worlds rejected us, we prepared for extinction. You humans gave us back our future. That is worth any temporary displacement. But the evacuation wasn't without its challenges. A sudden atmospheric deterioration over one of the largest cities forced an emergency operation. Lieutenant Rodriguez led a team of shuttle pilots through violet lightning storms to rescue thousands of Calorians, their ship's shields barely holding against the electromagnetic disruption. Dr. Wu worked with Calorian scientists to modify the breakthrough drive, using their crystalline technology to stabilize the quantum fields. The modification would allow the ships to carry more passengers while reducing the strain on the engines, a perfect fusion of human innovation and Calorian precision. Maya watched from the Hope's observation deck as the evacuation continued around the clock. Human crews worked alongside Calorian volunteers, their different physiologies somehow complementing each other perfectly. Where humans provided adaptability and quick thinking, Calorians offered precision and calculated efficiency. A group of Calorian children approached the loading bay of a shuttle, their small crystalline forms flickering with anxiety. A human medical officer knelt down to their level, using light patterns she'd learned to project calming colors. The children's fear turned to fascination as she taught them a simple hand game to pass the time. They said your species was too primitive to help us, Lyra said, joining Maya at the window. But I've never seen such complexity in simplicity. Your people have no natural light patterns, yet you learn to communicate with our children. You have no crystalline resonance, yet you understand our music. Perhaps this is why the advanced worlds feared your aid. You adapt too quickly, learn too eagerly. Maya smiled. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When something needs to be done, we find a way to do it. As the first week of evacuation ended, news arrived from the outer system. A fleet of ships had appeared, representatives from the same advanced civilizations that had refused to help. They came to observe the evacuation. They claimed to ensure the protection of less developed species. Maya met with their representatives aboard the Hope. The advanced aliens wore elaborate environmental suits and spoke with carefully measured words. They expressed concern about humanity's reckless use of experimental technology. We appreciate your input, Maya replied diplomatically, but we're a bit busy saving lives at the moment. You're welcome to continue observing from a safe distance. After they left, Alina approached her captain. They're broadcasting constant updates to their homeworlds. I think we scared them. Good, Maya said softly. Let them see what primitive species can do when we work together. Let them wonder what other impossibilities we might achieve. 3 weeks into the evacuation, Caloria's atmosphere reached critical levels. The purple sky had grown so thin that stars were visible in broad daylight. The final phase of the operation began with a sense of desperate urgency. Captain Maya Patel hadn't slept in 36 hours, coordinating the last evacuations from the Hope's command center. Beside her, High Sentinel Lyra's crystalline form pulsed with the effort of organizing her people's final departure from their homeworld. Last group from the southern continent is aboard, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. Northern continent evacuation at 98%. Status of the atmospheric shield? Maya asked, though she could see the answer in Lyra's dimming glow. Failing, Dr. Wu responded grimly. We have perhaps 6 hours before total collapse. The radiation will make surface operations impossible after that. The crew had worked miracles. The evacuation ships, modified with Calorian technology, had performed far beyond their design specifications. Human pilots and Calorian navigators had formed seamless teams, their different perspectives combining to solve problems neither species could have handled alone. A sudden alarm blared through the command center. Atmospheric breach in Sector 7. Elena called out. 300 Kilorians still in the Crystal Archive. The Crystal Archive, the repository of Kilorian history, art, and knowledge. The evacuation plan had prioritized lives over artifacts, but a team of archivists had stayed behind, working to digitize as much of their civilization's legacy as possible. It's too late, one of the advanced civilization's observers stated flatly from their monitoring station. The radiation levels make rescue impossible. This is why emotional attachment to cultural artifacts is inefficient. Maya exchanged a glance with Lyra. In that moment, despite their completely different biologies, they shared a perfect understanding. Launch rescue shuttles, Maya ordered. Captain, Dr. Wu protested. The radiation levels. We'll kill the Kilorians in 20 minutes and give humans radiation sickness in 30. Maya finished. That gives us a 10-minute window. Rodriguez, Chen, you're with me. Suit up. What followed would be remembered in the histories of both species. 3 shuttles, piloted by human volunteers, dove through the deteriorating atmosphere. The ship's hulls creaked under the strain, their radiation shielding barely holding. Maya's shuttle landed hard on the crystal surface. Through her suit's faceplate, she could see the archive spires fracturing as the atmospheric pressure dropped. The rescue team sprinted inside, finding the Kilorian archivists still working, their forms dimming from radiation exposure. Your lives are worth more than any archive. Maya shouted through the translator as her team began evacuating the archivists. Some things are worth dying for, one archivist responded, still downloading data. You humans taught us that. Working together, the human rescue teams and Kilorian archivists managed to save both the people and a significant portion of the archive data. As the last shuttle lifted off, the archive's crystal towers collapsed behind them, turning to dust in the dying atmosphere. Back on the Hope, Maya received treatment for radiation exposure alongside her team. Through the medbay window, she watched the final evacuees arrive. Against all odds, they had done it. 12 million Kilorians had been evacuated, along with portable examples of their technology and culture. High Sentinel Lyra visited the medbay, her form glowing with a warmth that needed no translation. The advanced civilizations are departing, she announced. They say they must reevaluate their assessment of developing species. Maya laughed, then winced at the movement. Good. Maybe next time they'll think twice before ignoring a cry for help. They do not understand, Lyra continued. They measure advancement by the age of technology, the scale of achievements. They never considered measuring it by the size of one's compassion. The journey back to Earth would take 3 months, but it would not be the end of the story. The Kilorians would establish a new home on a terraformed Mars, their crystalline cities rising from the red soil. The partnership between humans and Kilorians would revolutionize technology, art, and culture on both sides. More importantly, the galaxy had changed. Other young civilizations, inspired by Earth's example, began reaching out to help each other. The advanced powers found their influence waning as a new network of mutual aid and cooperation grew among the primitive species. Years later, Elena Santos stood in the new Crystal Archive on Mars, recording the story for future generations. On the wall, a crystalline sculpture captured the moment of first contact, a human hand reaching out to a being of living crystal, their forms meeting across the vast distance of space. Below it, an inscription glowed in both human and Kilorian script. They called us primitive for creating art instead of weapons. They called us primitive for valuing culture over power. They called us primitive for answering a cry for help. But on this day, humanity and Kiloria proved that true civilization is measured not by the strength of our technology, but by the strength of our compassion. The sculpture cast rainbow patterns across the archive floor, a permanent reminder that in the darkest of times, hope can come from the most unexpected places, that when advanced civilizations turned away, humanity reached out. And in doing so, they redefined what it meant to be an advanced civilization.